Hello, everyone. Welcome. And thank you for joining. You can chat amongst yourself using the chat. If you have questions, you can throw it into the Q&A and we will get to that in the panel. This could be a little different than some of the webinars that we do in that we have an incredible group with us that we are going to just kind of dive into this and talk about what is going on, what might happen, and how should we be reacting or thinking about this or planning. Before we jump into the panel, I just wanted to take a few minutes and kind of go through what is happening. Short debrief on how we got here, what is going on, potential implications of this ban, how it might happen, and then we'll jump into our Q&A with our lovely panelists. Okay. So obviously you all are here because you've seen the news. This feels like a conversation we've had before because we have, but there is obviously a pretty concerted effort right now and a pretty big push to think about if we should be banning TikTok, and there is currently a bill in Congress to do so. Biden is made it clear that that's something he's currently supporting. It's got bipartisan support. There is a lot of swirling about if this is going to happen, how it might happen, what it could look like. So just to give a little context, again, feels a bit like Groundhog Day because this is a place we have been before. In July of 2020, there started to be some grumblings and rumors that TikTok could be banned. They've in response, created a position for an American CEO. In August of 2020, Trump signed an executive order to say that TikTok would be banned in 45 days if it wasn't sold to an American company. Then in December of 2020, a federal judge blocked that ban, and it just kind of then went away. Obviously, we had some other things going on in the country at the time. And 2 years later, again, we started to hear some other kind of grumblings. I actually did in our kind of YouTube show that I do every week. One of my predictions for 2023 was that I thought TikTok could get banned. So there was kind of in fits and starts, you would see people talking about, oh, I think they might announce a ban for this today. So it was starting to heat up at the end of last year. Then March 7th, a bipartisan group of senators introduced the Restrict Act, gives the federal government new powers to ban apps from China, other countries, just more kind of sweeping power to ban these apps. And the CEO of TikTok recently testified in front of Congress. So that's kind of where we are now. Law is kind of still working its way through. There haven't been any huge updates since late March, but our clients have been asking a lot about this. We have been talking a lot about it, and certainly is top of mind. Obviously, don't have to tell everyone that TikTok has gotten increasingly powerful, over 1 billion users, 150 million active users in America every month. Revenues are also exploding, up to 5 billion last year. Spend is increasing year over year, even in a time when brands are pulling back on a lot of their spend. One of the things that makes this difficult is the company has also gotten quite valuable. 50 billion, I would say, is the floor. And probably the minimum of what the company's worth. I think you could probably make a case for it to be, closer to $100 billion. So incredibly valuable organization, and lots of growth left for them. So the major concerns in kind of setting up this legislation and why would we ban TikTok at all, is one, a national security threat. There's a fear that this data is kind of going through China. The Chinese government has access to it, and that they could potentially use it for tracking U.S. citizens, some espionage, data collection, things like that. So there's concerns there about where our data is going. There's concerns about how the Chinese government might be able to use the platform to influence what is happening in America. Certainly TikTok has an outsized impact on culture, and I think there is a concern about that tool that is guiding culture being kind of guided by, in part, by Chinese government. And obviously US-China relations are generally not in a great place. And, this is kind of become a part of the increasingly hot kind of, relationship between two countries. And again, is seemingly becoming less about the actual app than about our relationship with China and China's relationship with us. So some things that are standing against the ban. So this is maybe reasons that the ban could be pushed through. Some of the reasons it might not. One, I think there's a feeling that this wouldn't stand. A federal judge has already, turned down one attempt to ban the app. So I think there is a kind of feeling amongst legal professionals and scholars and people that understand this a lot better than I do, that they wouldn't even be able to do this, that ultimately they don't even know that the government has the power to do this, and that it is not so much a ruling against the app, but it would be that millions of Americans would have their free speech impeded on, and that this is just like not something that the government could even do. Again, we have been here before. There's precedents for this push to ban it, and it didn't work before. And TikTok is obviously mounting a pretty heavy response. They have very deep pockets to fight this, and the app is just significantly larger and more impactful than it was in 2020, where even in 2020 we were doing a little bit of TikTok work, but I would say it was less than 5%, probably less than 3%. It's probably now 20-25% of what we do as far as paying influencers. So it's a wildly different situation. And I think it would have been hard to ban it in 2020, even harder now. How would this even happen? We're going to talk a bit more about this with the panelists, but there's kind of three ways that this can go. They can force them to sell the company. That's what they're saying. Again, whether or not they can actually do that is yet to be seen. But this was also the Trump executive order. This was the preferred kind of path, was that Oracle or Microsoft or someone would sell it. That creates some antitrust issues. And again, ByteDance, who owns TikTok, has said that they have no interest in doing that, and they do not see themselves divesting. If it did get banned, kind of two ways to do this. It could get banned from the App Store. There's a precedent to this happening. Apps have been removed from the App Store before. It still means you'd be able to use the app. It still means you'd be able to visit it on the web. You could still publish and consume and engage, but no new downloads, no updates. So eventually the app would kind of break down and not be useful. And it also couldn't grow, and there would be it would be harder to get new users. Or it could just be a full ban. This is what India has recently done. Go to TikTok.com. You can't access it. You can't access the app. It's a complete full ban. And the app is essentially useless in the US. Probably the least likely, but worth discussing. Potential implications. We're going to talk a lot more about this in the panel, but obviously, I think for everyone on this webinar, if you are in influencer marketing and social, this has been such an exciting platform. We were waiting for seemingly half a decade for something to, come in the market that would, really be a competitor to Instagram. We had little flashes in the pan. We had Vine. We had some other things that were interesting, but nothing really mounted any actual kind of challenge to Instagram until TikTok. It has, I think, greatly expanded what we can do on social. So much of the the content that is, I think, again, changing culture and driving our consumer behaviors is increasingly happening on TikTok. So banning it would be a big hit. I think the internet would be a less interesting place. But we're going to talk about, if that happened, how should we react? So as we go through questions, again, please drop in anything into the Q&A. But I want to bring our panelists on. So if y'all want to come onto video here, and I will stop the share, right? Yeah, this is a better view. Okay. Welcome, y'all. I think let's actually start with, I was going to read y'all's bios and introduce you, but I think y'all know yourselves probably a little bit better than I know you. Well, I know y'all quite well. So Danielle, if you want to start and just give a little background of who you are and what you do.
Sure. Hey, everybody. Great to be here. I am Danielle Kantor. I am a digital content strategist, facilitator, and have been working in the political space for my whole career. I work with political organizations, advocacy groups, political campaigns, all in the digital space, and excited to be here to talk about this.
Fantastic. And Madeline.
Hi, everyone. I'm Madeline Twomey. I have spent my career in marketing for the last 10 or 15 years or so. Like Danielle, I've also primarily worked at the intersection of politics and advertising. So I was a media buyer and planner for a very long time, doing kind of traditional online advertising before getting into the creator space. I recently worked with the Biden campaign in 2020 and have done some work with the White House since the Biden administration. And I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're happy to have you. It's good to see you. And Mikey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Saoma. You can call me Mikey. I am currently a senior associate here at Fohr, and I basically have a background in politics. I've been working in grassroots campaigning for the past 5 years prior to my time here. I started off in the field, and I even did a campaign in New Zealand in 2017. Most recently, I did Next Gen America's National Influencer Program in 2020, which was super great and successful, kind of like a first of its kind experiment with grassroots campaigning, like tiptoeing into the influencer marketing world. So that was very interesting, and I decided I wanted to do that full time. So here I am at Fohr.
We are lucky to have you. And for those who don't know, I guess I could have introduced myself. I'm James. I started this company 10 years ago. And if you're at this webinar, you probably know who I am, but welcome, hello. This is a little different. We brought you all together here as panelists. It sounds like a wedding or something. We're here today. But I think that what interested me is in our world, in social, with influencer, we haven't had it hasn't been politicized too much, right? The government hasn't had an enormous role outside of FTC guidelines. In 10 years of doing this, influencer marketing hasn't been a issue that's being discussed in Congress a lot, right? Like we had, obviously, the Cambridge Analytica, Russian interference, but that was more just social than influencer, and it was a little different conversation. And I think for a lot of us who are a little, a bit afraid, a bit confused what is going to happen, I felt like, y'all having background in politics and on the brand side and doing influencers, you'd be able to give a kind of interesting perspective here. And I think the first question, which I'd love to hear from everyone, is just how do you think this ends ultimately? Like, if you're going to give a prediction, what happens next? Because I could go online and I could read that it's absolutely going to get banned, and I can read polls that say Americans want it to get banned, and I can read that there's no way it's going to get banned and nobody wants it to be banned. what do you think is going to happen? Danielle, I see you nodding, so I feel like you're ready to start and kick us off.
Yeah, I can start. I don't know that I have a perfect answer because I think I see this could go a few ways, but it feels like something's gotta adjust and happen because this has such bipartisan support, and that's so rare these days, not just from constituents, but from actual legislators. And there is a national security threat that the app poses. And so I don't know what form it takes, but I do see this probably ending with some sort of adjustment to the app or the data security or privacy, hopefully in a way that allows people to still access the app, maybe. That would be my hope, but maybe in some modifications to the way the data is collected or stored in the app. So that's where I'd probably see it ending up.
What about y'all? Mikey, Madeline,
Yeah, I kind of want to go off of that. So I see that happening ultimately, Danielle, but I also kind of on the flip side of things, I see a potential reality, right, where politicians are kind of responding to their constituents, just how we know politicians are very much like a driving factor in a lot of their policy decisions is like how it will poll in the next election, right? And I think what we're starting to see overwhelmingly is that the grand, like a lot of the audience, a lot of the people who will be voting who are on these apps are very biased towards the apps and do not want to see them go, and could potentially transfer those sentiments into the elections for these people. And I think that could potentially play a role in some politicians flipping later on. Something to keep aware of.
I would say I think the most likely outcome is the kind of like middle ground solution that TikTok is currently working on, which is called Project Texas. I think you touched on this, James, but just to reiterate, this idea that TikTok would kind of sequester its US data and put it in Texas in the US and have it be managed by a US company and US personnel. They're already working on this. They, I think, have said that it will be finalized this fall. And so I think that's obviously the most likely outcome. And I actually think that TikTok will do this, whether or not we continue to see heat coming from the admin or Congress. I think they understand that there's been enough of these conversations to date, and that I think they want to play ball, right? They want to operate in this country and they want to have good relationships with the administration and with Congress. And so I think ultimately that's the likely solution. I think the other thing I would say is a lot of the conversation in the hearing, in addition to the national security concerns, was this question around data collection and privacy. And I'm really interested personally, because this is something I'm really passionate about, is to see the conversation in Congress continue around how do we make sure that Americans understand what all companies are collecting on them and how they can manage that.
Yeah, it does feel like part of a bigger conversation. And I think that, you know, what seems clear, and I know when we caught up ahead of this, that like, if you look at the two scenarios, one being like absolutely nothing changes and we just kind of move on, or there's a full ban, both of those feel unlikely, right? That like, I think just the fact that, you know, there is bipartisan support of this, and, you know, the American government has come out and said, hey, this is important to us. It's unlikely that they're just going to walk away with no changes. They need to have something to kind of walk away with, say, we got this thing. And maybe it is, you know, again, I think TikTok has been savvy in reacting ahead of time, right? Like when the first ban, they got ahead of it and said, oh, we're bringing in a US CEO. We're going to just do this. We're not going to have to told to do this. We're just going to make sure this happens. But, you know, that middle ground does seem likely. I think what is interesting for me, and like, I am surprised at, you know, how bipartisan support is, how politicized this has been. You know, we see things, there was just a question about like the Montana ban, which I believe is, they said they were going to fine people. I don't know that a state has the ability to ban an app. But like how when things kind of like go from being like, we're talking about a quote unquote real issue and the actual thing of data and privacy, to like, oh, no, this is actually about something else. This is a political issue. How can you help people think about like, you know, yeah, how the government, how politicians are going to navigate this? If that question makes sense. Because again, I think it's new for us that like the things that we're doing every day are now being talked about in Congress. I think anyone who has watched a congressional hearing about something that they have deep knowledge of realizes that like maybe the politicians don't have quite about much knowledge about these things as we do. And so again, this is now like about something else. I think that there's also a conversation, you know, about social and young people, and I think TikTok is being kind of pulled into that. I just saw another article about like, you know, a TikTok challenge and somebody getting sick or dying from doing a TikTok challenge. And again, these are kind of like a bit of misinformation because like it's not really like the Benadryl challenge is not like actually a TikTok challenge. But again, I think it's all to like how the platform is being politicized and how much more likely that makes more extreme action, like even a partial ban possible.
Sure. I mean, I think the fact that ByteDance is Chinese owned plays obviously a huge role in this. If this company wasn't owned by China, I don't think we'd be having these same conversations. So because the company is based in China, there are certain laws in China that say that if they were to ask the company to turn over data, that they would have to comply with that. TikTok has repeatedly said that they wouldn't like be in a position to do that or need to do that. I think that's somewhat in conflict with Chinese law and what that actually states. I think there's a difference between it being on the books and it being likely, but you know, who knows? I think that is the major concern here. And obviously our, you know, US relations with China is an ongoing political debate. And I think that that's really at the heart of this. I think what's been interesting to see is to Danielle's point, how bipartisan this has really become. I think Republicans generally want to seem like they are, you know, tough on foreign relations. And as a result, I think Democrats always want to also prove that they're also tough on foreign relations because that's not generally seen to be the case. And so I think that is a large part of what's going on here.
So for everyone here now to shift a little more tactical, again, we've been in conference rooms and people are like, should we be spending? Should we be investing? And not just in an influencer campaign, but like, you know, spending all this time building a following for a platform that could be banned. Like, what conversations are you having? Should people be investing here? Should they sit on the sidelines and wait to see what happens? What's y'all's advice right now? What are you seeing out there? Mikey, you want to start?
Yeah, so basically I kind of think that, again, nothing is set in stone. And as we've seen, there's kind of compelling arguments for it to go either way and kind of go somewhere unaffected, like not super effective in between type of way that won't really see any potential real world impact in an actual TikTok ban, especially like within the next year. And I also want to like take note that these type of policies that would be made, like a potential TikTok ban that could take months to even years potentially to actually like have any real world impact on our markets. So I kind of see it as something as we shouldn't like completely divesting in TikTok would be, I think, financially irresponsible. I do think it would be very smart to notice the potential like ways we could pivot in like our funding and investments if this were the case, and like really keep a close eye and attention to the policies and what's being talked in discussion, also other potential platforms. I know things such as like Clapper are being offered or like spoken about recently. It's another app that could potentially be a TikTok replacement one day. Of course, there's nothing exactly like TikTok, but anything from Clapper to things we already know, such as YouTube Shorts, IG Reels, things of that nature. We just want to kind of make sure we're present and really keeping a close eye to all of those. And I also think that we want to keep in mind that TikTok has kind of created its own niche and been a first in a lot of different ways. And we can't expect that to disappear. We also can't expect other companies to completely reflect that immediately if there was to be a TikTok ban, right? So I think it would be within the realm of reality that there could be a new app coming up, regardless if it's a new app or if it's an old app reflecting different aspects of TikTok. TikTok has set a new standard of like what creators want, what consumers want, what brands want, and something will come together to fill that niche, whether it's old or new. And so I think we should be prepared to kind of divert instead of create new strategies and plans, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like what's interesting is you think about, let's say TikTok goes away tomorrow, right? And 150 million Americans that use it every month, they don't disappear. You know, they're not like, we're not like Thanos snapping half of the population away, right? So they're not in those same communities because those communities don't exist if TikTok goes away, but they are going to spend time in other places, right? They might spend more on, probably will spend more on Instagram, Snap, YouTube, other platforms, but also maybe they'll spend more time playing games or watching Netflix or HBO, or probably not going outside, let's be honest, but like maybe. And so I think as advertisers, right, like, yeah, there's this period of flux, but ultimately, you know, our job as marketers is to capture attention, and that attention will disperse, you know, and it won't disappear. It might be a little harder to find. You know, Madeline, Danielle, what, you know, are you having any conversations with your clients about this? Is this something people are worried about? And what are you, you know, what's your advice? What are you telling them?
Yeah, I would say a few things. I agree with Mikey that TikTok is kind of its own animal in a lot of ways, but I also helped manage a page of, 2 million followers on TikTok, and my guidance was always, every post that we're posting on TikTok, we should be posting on YouTube Shorts. We should be posting on Instagram Reels. You can capture a lot of views that way with obviously very low lift. So I think as a creator manager, I've always felt like you have to be multi-platform, you have to be everywhere, and you have to have your own channels as well, right? A blog, a newsletter, your community Discord groups, merch, etc. So I think in a lot of ways, like thinking about the TikTok ban, not much has changed in terms of how I'm advising my clients. And I also think a lot of the lessons learned from TikTok actually are really applicable to YouTube Shorts, to Instagram Reels. I mean, we're seeing even Spotify and Reddit move towards vertical video and algorithmic recommendation consumption models. So I think there's a lot of takeaways that are applicable to other platforms. I would say if you're not yet on TikTok, I feel like that's the question, right? If you're not yet there, should you be investing there? I think the answer is still yes. Every dollar you spend on TikTok is going to go further than every dollar you spend on any other platform right now. So I don't think there's any value in waiting until we see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I agree. I also think seeing a lot of the creators on TikTok try and move their communities to different channels in anticipating a ban, or even just broadening their reach. And I think that's working to some degree. I think TikTok, its own beast, and people spend very different amount of time there. I always think it's more like a content channel than a social channel, but I do think TikTok's still worth investing in. While it's around, it's an incredibly powerful platform to connect with people. And so I think if you have the resources to do it, like Madeline said, I think you can replicate some of that stuff across other channels, but it's really valuable.
yeah. And I think for brands, you know, it's two-pronged. Like I understand the like concern about if I'm investing all this money in building a following in a platform that might not exist, that's concerning. But on the like influencer side of things, once people see it, right, you've gotten the value, right? Like, and that value is short-lived by design. Those posts have a half-life of 24 48 hours or something. And so like making sure, again, if your job is capturing attention, and the attention is still on TikTok, it behooves you to be investing there. And I think even thinking about, well, what if it goes away? We're spending all this effort to grow a following. That's also the nature of social, right? I mean, I'm old enough to have gotten started on Tumblr. Now I've got my 150,000 followers on Tumblr. They're there technically. None of them probably remember their passwords anymore, and nobody goes there. And so, like, ultimately, platforms die. That's part of the life cycle. One day, Instagram will not be as powerful as it is today, and TikTok, should it live a kind of long and natural life, it will die of probably natural causes, and people will move on to something else. And I think as marketers, again, we need to be investing in the places where attention currently is. And I think what everyone is saying is, like, right now, attention is still very much on TikTok. And ultimately, because we feel a ban is, feeling less and less likely to be a full outright ban, and that we'll find a compromise, that we should still be investing here. Again, for a lot of companies, this has TikTok is a channel that's working really well, and I think it's driving a lot of sales. Like, I just saw maybe it was in Target. They have the like hang tags now. I saw it as seen on TikTok in store, and so we're seeing this impacting retail and impacting consumer behavior more and more. And so I do think it is still worth talking about, like, okay, what if? So let's just like live in that theoretical for a minute. And I know we have some influencers on the line as well, so we want to talk about that. But for brands, if we were going to live in a reality where, let's say 3 months from now, we know TikTok's gone, what are we telling brands to do? What should we be thinking about? How should we be structuring the work that we're doing today? Like, what's some advice to just get ready for a potential worst case scenario?
Sorry, can I go?
Yeah, go.
I would like to speak to this by like advising brands should really start diversifying your influencer marketing strategies, instead of relying on TikTok, but maybe consider partnering with influencers on other platforms like Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat, and encourage your influencers that you already have contracts or partnerships with to really start doubling down and like basically doing all that they can to push their audiences onto their other socials to really like maintain their strength and engagement. I also think it'd be helpful to potentially shift focus a bit more to micro influencers. That's always a great option. Micro influencers on smaller platforms can still provide a pretty strong ROI without the risk of a platform ban. So that's always something to like have in your corner. And yeah, just overall leveraging branded short form video content and promoting it across multiple social channels. Like we were saying before, like a lot of this content can be reshared. So ultimately, like if there's content that you're reusing, just like leverage the type of content that can be duplicated in multiple platforms with minor edits or like format changes.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, Mikey. I think, again, like the best influencer campaigns, the best are multi-channel, right? Or multi-platform, and they've never been TikTok focused. I do actually a lot of work that I would say is TikTok first, but not TikTok only. And I think I think we just need to be prepared to be everywhere, again, as brands, but also as creators, because things can change overnight.
Madeline, there was a specific question on this about repurposing content. And I know the general thought is, hey, every platform should have its own content and or be tweaked or personalized in some way. That's a lot of work, especially now as we think about YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Instagram, etc. Yeah, what is your advice? There was a question like, can you just repost your TikToks across those platforms? Do you need to optimize and change it for specific platforms? What's your advice there?
Yeah, so I think the short answer is you can definitely repurpose content. I think the longer answer is we talk about Instagram, but like Instagram is actually like stories, which is so different than in-feed posts, which is so different than reels. And same thing with YouTube. YouTube long form video is obviously very different than shorts. So I think reposting TikTok content as a YouTube short and as an Instagram reel is great. I mean, they are algorithmically based feeds of vertical video. And so I think if you're creating that piece of content, it's just a no-brainer to put it on those other platforms to get views. Obviously, I think if your entire Instagram strategy just becomes reposting TikToks, that's not effective. You obviously still need to be thinking about how does a platform differ in terms of demographics, and how does it differ in terms of how people engage with in-feed posts and stories, et cetera.
Yeah, I want to kind of go off that. A really good example of that is like, for example, on IG Reels, content that it's been learned that content that has like on-screen text performs the best there, whereas that's not necessary for like the highest performance on TikTok, right? So like subtle changes and differences are just really important to keep note of. It can't always just be a complete repost. But if you need to, I did want to throw a plug. There are apps out there to download without the watermark. Like there's a website called snaptic.app. Just saying, I know a lot of people come across a tricky spot with that. So throwing it out there.
Yeah. And I think that for brands out there, we should be, I think the idea of being active on all of these platforms makes a lot of sense. I also think that, especially for smaller brands, often this is a bit counterintuitive to I think what we're discussing today, but it sometimes does make sense to focus on a platform. I mean, if you're a company doing sub 10 million a year, you're hustling and trying to grow, and you're thinking about how can I do YouTube shorts and YouTube long form and Instagram and stories and TikTok, and maybe what's my Snapchat and Pinterest strategy. Like ultimately, like you have to also pick something that's going to be manageable and a platform that makes sense for your brand. I think ultimately TikTok and Instagram probably the places that most people should focus, but there's a lot of pressure sometimes, I think, to feel like I need to be doing all of this all the time. And ultimately, like you need to be doing it well and making sure you are adding to the conversation and putting stuff into the world that's like interesting and that the audience is going to like. And sometimes you can't do that on 4 or 5 different platforms. We have, I am loving, there's a huge amount of Q&A here, and I have like a bunch of other questions for y'all, but I want to start working through some of these because a lot of them are really interesting. There's a few questions here on Lemonade. There's a question says, we're talking about there was a war on Juul. Juul took most of the hit when it came to laws against vaping. Other companies have stepped in, are thriving, doing well. Is it going to be something similar? And also, Lemonade is ByteDance's new app. If there was a TikTok ban, would that affect Lemonade? How should we be thinking about that? Anyone can jump in.
I think Lemonade is a good example of how quickly this space moves and how slowly, as in comparison, government tends to move. And we see this across government regulations, including FTC regulations, including FCC regulations, which is applicable a lot to political work. So I think actually the Restrict Act, which is the legislation that Congress has put forward, or the Senate has put forward, may not, would include potentially Lemonade, but like may not include CapCut, for example, which is also owned by ByteDance. But I think if those things move forward, they would be amended to include them, is my understanding. Or I mean, not my understanding, is my best guess.
Mm-hmm. There's a question here about YouTube Shorts. I feel like it's also been coming up a lot. Again, with our clients, should we be on here? What's going on? You hear about stories of people really growing their followings there. Any of y'all have experience working on YouTube Shorts? Are brands moving over and experimenting there more? How should we be thinking about that? Is that a potential, replacement should TikTok get banned?
I feel like I've personally noticed YouTube Shorts start to skyrocket in the sense of it's kind of much easier for like something to go viral there, right? And as opposed to IG Reels, which I would say is the most difficult of the big three to get really viral. But I want to use that to point out, especially going back on a previous question of is it too late to like go into TikTok? I just want to throw and re-emphasize that I really don't think it's too late to go into TikTok and to stay on TikTok till the end, just because the way the algorithm is, it's so you can go viral like that and have a giant following like that, and you don't want to miss your opportunity to gain that following, even if it's the last stretch, even if we had a month or two left, that audiences have been built in a day. So I would definitely recommend that a lot. I totally pivoted from the question. I'm sorry, but it was relevant.
No, that answers another question. So that's good.
I think it's a great point. And I think the other social platforms have seen the power of TikTok and the way that people are flocking to it, both creators and brands and users. And so I think they're incentivizing folks who are going to come onto their platform and try out things like Reels or Shorts. And so I do think there's probably a lot of value in trying to figure out those channels now, especially in light of a ban and with these apps trying to incentivize people to come to those platforms. You're going to have more likely chance of going viral, seeing growth quickly as new people flock over there. So if you have the resources, I think it's worth exploring for sure.
Yeah. We've talked a bit about moving your following. How do you move a following from one platform to another? Again, I can speak from personal experience. When I had my Tumblr following back in the day, and Instagram came out, and all of us Tumblr kids thought it was like such a joke, and I didn't move my following over, and then by the time I felt like I needed to, it was too late. It is, I find it really difficult to migrate an audience. It's difficult to get an audience to do anything, especially go follow you on another app. Do y'all have any best practices, anything you've seen work, or is it just one of those things that's just really, really hard to do?
I want to just throw out there that it's really hard to do, but I just feel like a best practice, and I'll leave it open for different methods, but what I've noticed is don't just tell the audience to follow you on another platform. Give them a reason, give them something that's exclusive that you will be doing or providing or giving to some capacity on that other platform that they won't be able to continue getting. Therefore, incentivize them. Don't just tell them.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, 100% agree. I was going to say the same thing. I think I see a lot of creators use exclusive content or giveaways as a way to encourage people to follow them on other platforms. I will say, I think it's harder to go from Instagram to TikTok than it is to go from TikTok to Instagram, kind of in line with our conversation about Reels to date. I do think if you're a creator or a brand that's Instagram focused and you're still not on TikTok, it really does require you spending a lot of time on the platform to really understand the weirdness and the intricacies of it before you can start posting. I see a lot of creators who are Instagram first, really honestly not do well on TikTok because they kind of just go in thinking they can post the same stuff and you really can't. So again, I think there's kind of it's a one-way relationship in a lot of ways, but I think offering more behind the scenes content is a great way to focus specifically on TikTok. TikTok does reward kind of more unpolished content. So that might be a helpful kind of tip for folks.
Yeah. We've been talking about that. I mean, it's there's this whole generation that, is photo first. Their idea of social media was a photo and a caption, and you spend a decade and a half doing that. And then all of a sudden you have to translate all of your content to video, and it's really hard, and then there's this exciting new group of creators who video is all they know. This is how they communicate. This is how they like to consume things. And it's really hard to compete with them, if you are thinking in still photos and captions instead of how do I turn this into a video. And I think we're seeing that tension of a lot of those kind of legacy influencers who are struggling. And Madeline, I think to your point, part of it is, allowing yourself to be a student again and get in, we always say like, yeah, you got to like, make sure you're at the party a little bit a while before you try and like take over the music. Nobody wants, you can't just like show up to someone's house and change the music as much as I actually try and do that often. People don't like it. So yeah, you have to kind of understand the place that you're working in. I want to get back to the questions from the audience here, and y'all make sure to keep dropping them in should you have any others. But a question I had, y'all are have been in the political space, been an influencer in social for a while. Now, I think Madeline, we met through work back in maybe 2018. 2018, I was like, I really wanted, I wanted politicians and political parties to get more involved and work with influencers more. I wanted influencers to talk about politics. It was something that was not happening. There was, not a huge amount of interest in 2018 from, political leaders or candidates to work with influencers, to give them access, to, collaborate with them in any way, certainly not to pay them in any capacity. And there wasn't a lot of awareness or understanding of how it works. Now, Instagram certainly has changed so much. 2018, there was no political content. It is now obviously quite political. TikTok, I think, by the nature of when it gained prominence, has always been political, or political content has been on that platform. What's the feeling inside the machine a bit? Are people starting to understand this more? Is this starting to be a bigger part? And like, how much does that have to do with now this conversation where even 2 or 3 years ago, politicians might have been like, TikTok, what do we care if TikTok's here or not? How much are they now thinking about like, oh, actually, we really need these platforms to be around, and understanding and investing in this industry? Anyone feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I will just say, James, to your credit, I think you're ahead of the curve on this. And actually in 2018, my very short side story is that I was interviewing for a job in kind of the nonprofit advocacy space. And in the interview, I was like, I really want to do work with influencers. And I like didn't get the job because I think there wasn't an understanding of how those two worlds could intersect. And I think that's changed dramatically since then. Now I see a lot of political groups, everything from public officials to campaigns to kind of the nonprofit advocacy side, are really interested in working with creators and are very interested in TikTok. I think it was a slow beginning even through 2020, but I think in the last 2 years, we've seen it kind of explode. There's still a lot of education that I think all of us can do to help those folks better understand this world. Obviously creators are not just ads, they're people. And I think that's usually where some of the disconnect comes in. But I do think it has kind of added to this conversation about TikTok and whether or not, there should be this ban. I think AOC is a good example of someone who understands the power of social media and recently actually joined TikTok, and her first post was specifically around her thoughts on the TikTok ban. So I think with understanding also comes, I think it's possible for us to say, we as a movement understand the power of these platforms and of TikTok in particular. And that's also why there's probably a better understanding of maybe some of the concerns around that power being in the wrong hands is kind of what I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of want to piggyback off of that and just kind of mention how I feel like politicians using social media, right? It's kind of just, and especially like TikTok within their campaigns, it's something that I feel to most of us is like, yeah, that makes sense. Why haven't you been doing that? And of course, it's no surprise that just like is the case with most other pop culture phenomenon, hashtag Pokemon, go to the polls. Politicians are just really behind on some of this stuff, right? So they kind of jump into it late. Similar origin story in that capacity to Madeline. I remember in 2018, 2019, I was working for a nonprofit that was focused on getting out the youth vote, right? And they noticed that I was getting a lot of local influencers as part of like my personal campaign tactics to speak out on voting and whatnot. And they were like, this is interesting. That's when they kind of got the idea to like make a national influencer program and put me ahead of that, right? And one thing I realized is that a lot of these organizations and a lot of politicians, although they're starting to realize the importance of influencer marketing, I don't think they're realizing how crucially important it is and how to run it successfully. Let's say we know here at Fohr there is a lot. It is a well-oiled machine to like run successful, thorough, results-driven campaigns. And I just believe that a lot of politicians and campaigns just underestimate the capacity needed to do so, and therefore aren't super successful in it, and might therefore kind of start to lean against like marketing in that sense. At least that's what I noticed in my time when I was still in politics. Hopefully that's changing. Hopefully they're learning to get agencies behind that type of work. But yeah.
Yeah, I think campaigns and politicians can be pretty risk averse because there's a lot of backlash you can get from doing things, and I think required some people putting their toe out there to say, all right, this is how you might do it, and that there's an authentic way to engage with influencers. It's not like they're going to post about a beauty skincare thing and then say, oh, okay, here's how you should vote. There's a way to do it with authenticity that captures their story or their own experience, and I think it just took a little bit of time for people to get that and see it and to start to believe it. I think it's definitely changing because I think politicians and campaigns see the power of these communities to really reach people in the same way brands have for a long time now. So that's great. That's finally happening. I think it's not fully adopted yet, but I think more and more, I think we'll definitely see a lot of it around 24.
Yeah, I think that's something that gives me like comfort in this. Obviously, I love TikTok. We do a lot of work there. We want it to continue to be, I think one of you said, continue to be enjoyed in a way that is like safe and, doesn't put anyone at risk. Like, I think we all want that. I think something that gives me comfort is that politicians do have such a deeper understanding of these tools than they did years ago, and ultimately selfishly know that increasingly this is how they're going to reach their constituency. And ultimately, I think a outright ban is, kind of like radioactive for any party to be behind, as far as just how I think upset, obviously, a large part of the population would be. This is, one of the favorite things for us here at Fohr is that we're supporting this whole new group of entrepreneurs, these people who are running these businesses. And if you just snap your fingers and take away, thousands, tens of thousands of people's livelihoods, not to mention all the small businesses that are using these platforms to reach their customers, that's a pretty tricky message to navigate. And ultimately, I think one that I do think they'll find that middle ground, and everyone will be able to walk away saying they had some impact, and we'll move on to something else. But thank you all so much for walking us through all of this and for giving your time and insights today. For the TLDR for everyone, our thoughts are, we'll meet in that happy middle, that regardless of what happens, there is, so much amazing things happening on TikTok. You should be there anyway. You should be investing anyway. If there was a ban, it would take quite some time. And this is where culture is. And as a brand, like, getting your brand in front of culture and connecting with new customers is what your job is. And so, like, ultimately, we think everyone should still be there, engaging, and but also try and diversify, try and move that audience while you still can. Generally, that's just savvy, good marketing. So thank you to all of y'all for joining. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. We will send out a little deck of insights and this recording. Lovely to hang out with y'all.